Brainwash with Dr. Tom, guitar picks with Cyril Lance, Tribal Tech.
Tribal Tech, yeah. So now we're heading into kind of like the fusion stuff and the jazz, which I really got into for a long time. And actually Kelly Pace, the drummer in our band, turned me on to Tribal Tech, and Scott Henderson. But this is as much fusion-y as I want to get in the show. Fusion kind of got a bad rap, I think, probably for a good reason. It got real technical and kind of real disjointed from the listener. But Scott Henderson is one of our great modern guitar players. I don't think hardly anybody knows about him. And Scott, he's like this incredible blues guitar player, incredible rock player. He's kind of like the Stevie Ray Vaughan meets Miles Davis. And so this is a good example. And it's also just an example of what I like in music: the spontaneity, the free exploration, anything, and you can really feel that in this track.
Okay, it's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and guitar picks with Cyril Lance. On to the list, Pat Metheny. What can you tell us about this track going ahead?
Well, I'll start with Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is a huge influence on me. Pat Metheny is actually a jazz guitar player, one of the definitive modern jazz guitar players. He really got into kind of like electronic sounds, one of the first people to use a guitar synth. He was a real innovator on the instrument. But I first discovered Pat Metheny kind of a different route. Pat Metheny was from the Midwest, and he was one of the first people to kind of fuse kind of folk music sentimentality. I shouldn't say first, but in my mind anyway, my exposure. And he wrote very sentimental songs, as well as he would play with Ornette Coleman, do the most out jazzy stuff that you'd ever hear, and then he'd throw in this acoustic, beautiful, acoustic guitar piece that sounds like just a whole folk song or something. Because I played by myself, I started trying to figure out ways that I could sound like a full band, and so I'd retune an instrument. Part of it was like influence of slacky guitar, but so I kind of got into him through this acoustic guitar thing, and I didn't own my first electric guitar until my late 20s. All I had was my one acoustic guitar. In fact, my first guitar, which I played for years, was this cheap pawn shop thing my mom had gotten, like the $17. It was supposed to be one of those little kind of kids classical guitars, with the nylon strings, and I put steel strings on it, and the neck warped like this. And I played that thing for years and years and years, and because of it, I think I played kind of real rough and hard, and I break strings and stuff. But anyway, and then I started listening to his electric stuff. He is like technically one of the most amazing guitar players ever. I don't think there's hardly anybody that can match his technique. But he's also, to me, one of the most melodic guitar players.
Brainwash with Dr. Tom and guitar picks with Cyril Lance. Farka Toure.
He is an African musician, and I'm very much into world music. An old girlfriend of mine gave me a sitar once, and I got really into Indian classical music. I like all types of music, Asian music, Native American music, and I studied, the Hasidic musics of Eastern Europe, and I kind of find they all kind of come together into one source. And in fact, that's funny because the name of the album is The Source of this album. And I think Farka Toure is considered, I think he became known in this country as kind of like the African blues musician, but he's from Mali, and he plays a very simple modal style of music. And we talked about Taj Mahal earlier, getting back into African music. Well, Taj Mahal is actually on this album, but not on the track we're going to play, which is the first track, which I don't know how you pronounce it, but Goye Kor. The thing about African music is the rhythm, the tonality is a little different, but you can totally feel the connection between this music and what I call American roots music. So I love Afro pop, and Fela is a big influence of mine. King Sunny Ade. There's just so much great music coming out of that continent, and I think Paul Simon was a guy who made that music really big. You know, he did that, what was that, Graceland and something about the Saints. He started bringing a lot of that stuff in. But the singing in African music is so beautiful, and I don't know, anyway, we'll listen to the track, judge for yourself.
Brainwash for Dr. Tom and guitar picks with Cyril Lance, Derek Trucks.
Derek Trucks he's got a direct familial lineage to the Allman Brothers Band, and he's just this young wizard, and he plays with the Allman Brothers now, I think, actually, but you know, he's just really taken the slide to a whole new place. And I'm a big proponent of the slide guitar, and you know, we were talking about Muddy Waters earlier, that first track, and kind of like what got me into with Muddy, and you know, Muddy Waters was just with it's a real singing kind of. Muddy Waters had his own style that was so beautiful, but Derek Trucks he's got that roots blues feeling, but he's taking it into kind of a fusiony level, and his recent albums also, I think, are really spiritually motivated. This album that this is called Joyful Noise. So he's, I think, opening a lot of people's ears to a lot of the music that I listened to growing up and inspired me, but because he's got such a great audience through his Allman Brothers you know, connection, that I think he's able to bring a lot of this music to people who probably never listened to this stuff. And his albums are so varied now. There's some jazz, there's just some funky, gritty soul. He's got Solomon Burke singing on it. He's got you know, he's got world music on there. I think on this one he's got some Pakistani spiritual singers on there and stuff. But this composition I chose out of that album, Joyful Noise, I just love. It's just a beautiful fusion of kind of jazz and blues and all that kind of good stuff that I love so much.
Okay, it's Brainwash for Dr. Tom and guitar picks with Cyril Lance. Focus, Jan Akkerman. Answers? Question.
Jan Akkerman, a Swedish guy. Jan. Now, the story behind this is I had an older brother who was a real wild hippie when I was a kid. He used to bring home all the latest. This is when we were living in England, and he used to bring home all the latest music, which, of course, my parents hated. They were classical music people, and they thought it was all noise. But they brought home this one. He brought home this one album. I remember it so clearly. It was Focus, the name of the group, and it was called Moving Waves, with this very beautiful cover. And these guys, musicians, had all studied the Swedish Conservatory, and Jan Akkerman is actually kind of a renowned classical lute player. So they were really into composition, and composition in kind of almost the classical music sense, and kind of extended forms, and you know. But also they would just jam out, unbelievably so, and their concerts were great. And so they were kind of like a rock fusion group, and they were big in Europe, and very few people in this country know them. But Jan Akkerman became kind of my guitar hero, which is why this is on there. And this song is really long, and I think it's one of the most amazing recordings. But you can kind of take a pick if you want. You can excerpt maybe just some of the melody and the guitar solo if you want, but put the whole thing on if you want. I think it'll blow people's minds. So, but the funny thing about the story is that this was the only album my brothers ever brought home that my parents liked. And so as I was a kid, I was like, wow, Focus, I got it. So then I finally got this Focus album, and it became kind of one of my seminal albums. And Jan Akkerman, he's totally passionate. And again, he's one of these players with his completely unique style. If you ever put on Jan Akkerman, you know it's him. And to me, that's kind of like the highest compliment you could give an artist. So anyway, Jan Akkerman.